Building a team in Pokemon Champions gets expensive fast if you don't have Pokemon Home to transfer in your team from. I'm Jamie the Monster Tamer, and I'm here to show you how to build a viable team on a budget. Let's get started. If this isn't your first time jumping into competitive Pokemon, you could just skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to cover some super basic competitive Pokemon concepts. There are definitely other creators out there that are going to cover this in a lot more depth than me, so feel free to look them up. I know that Wolfie's already got a video out talking about some of this. But just very briefly, if you're interested in getting in competitive Pokemon, you need to know your type chart. Knowing what move in a moment is going to do the most damage to your enemy is critical. You will lose games off of choosing a wrong move. This takes a long time. There's a lot of types. They have interactions that don't always make sense with each other. And in many cases, there are dual typed Pokemon that change the interactions of offensive and defensive types. Don't feel too intimidated by this, and don't feel pressured to sit here and try to memorize this chart. But just know that if you don't have this topic under your belt, it's probably one of the first and easiest ways to improve your win rate. Expounding off a little bit on that into how to design your teams, you should be thinking a lot about type cores, which are groupings of Pokemon types that do a good job of covering each other's offensive and defensive weaknesses. The most common of these is a Fire, Water, Grass core, but there's also Steel, Dragon, Fairy, and Fighting Psychic Dark. What's important about these is not just that fire strong against grass, grass on water, but also that when one of these is threatened, another type in the core is going to resist the move. So let's say that Bulbasaur was threatened by an ice type Pokemon. He could switch into either Charmander or Squirtle in this case, and it would be a half times effective rather than 2 times effective move. When you build your team, you want to heavily consider having a core like this, even if it's not one of these 3 that I mentioned. Another basic concept is same type attack boost or stab. It makes moves that match the type of the user powered up. So for example, if Charizard is using a Heat Wave, which is a base 95 power move, it is going to be heavily increased 1.5 times to strengthen the move. Charizard also knows Solar Beam, which immediately looks on paper like it has more power, but because of the same type attack boost, it is going to do just a little bit less damage than a Heat Wave, assuming that it's the same effectiveness against the opponent. If you haven't touched competitive Pokemon before, you've probably not thought too much about stage conditions. Both weather and terrain are highly contested, and oftentimes whoever has better control will win the match. Each weather offers some kind of advantage, like sun and rain increasing the damage of fire and water type moves respectively, and decreasing the damage of the opposing. If you're running a water type Pokemon as your carry, and your enemy has the sun set up, it is going to be very difficult for you to win that match. Even if you aren't directly planning on using weather in some way on your team, it might be worth considering having a way to deal with or change the weather. The same sort of applies with terrain. It boosts the damage of some types of moves, as well as strange effects like no priority moves in psychic terrain, no status effects in misty terrain. Indeedee, which is not actually in Pokemon Champions yet, has become pretty notorious for setting psychic terrain with its ability and then using a powerful psychic type move, Expanding Force, which hits both Pokemon for stab and is 1.5 times boosted by the terrain as well. If this is not something that you're using on your team, which is entirely possible depending on what Pokemon you have available to you in Champions, just know that these are very powerful conditions and can change the way that games play out. In case you haven't played Pokemon in a while or haven't played older versions of Pokemon if you're a newer player, Mega Evolution has drastically changed the competitive landscape. If you didn't know, you get 1 Mega Evolution per game, and it can be any of your Pokemon so long as it is a Pokemon that can Mega Evolve and is holding a stone. Mega Evolving always boosts that Pokemon's stats as well as gives it a different ability, and in most cases, it's a significantly better ability. If we take Mega Metagross, for example, we see that he becomes much faster, which significantly improves his ability to carry. And he also increases his bulk. When Metagross Mega Evolves, he doesn't strictly get an ability upgrade, but it again improves his ability to carry. Clear Body, which is almost definitely what you would be choosing on your normal Metagross, prevents your stats from getting lowered, which might not sound like an amazing thing, but resisting Intimidates from Incineroars that are going to be on every single team you face makes him one of the stronger physical carry options. When he Mega Evolves, that changes into Tough Claws, which gives him a boost on many of the physical moves that he has to choose from. When you're building your team, you want to make sure that you have at least one Pokemon on there that can Mega Evolve. It might not be an amazing Pokemon, but you're leaving so much on the table, both in terms of stats and abilities, if you do not have one. Now for the fun part. If you're playing this free to play, this is probably close to what your box looks like. To get more Pokemon, make sure that you're playing competitively, as that's the only way to earn VP, in addition to your daily, weekly, and potentially Battle Pass quests. When you go to do your recruitments, your choice during those polls is really important. If you're fully free to play, you are limited to 30 Pokemon in your box. Especially if you're hoping to be running multiple teams, you have to consider very carefully. It's also exceptionally hard to walk in with a game plan, like a rain team, because you might get someone with Swift Swim, but then no rain setter. I'd honestly just encourage you at this point to pick some Pokemon that you like for now. If you have experience with competitive, this is going to be a lot easier to generally get some decent mons. Again, make sure that you pick one that can Mega Evolve, as this is probably going to be the cornerstone of your comp. If you're nervous when you're picking Pokemon, if you're getting good ones or not, there are a couple things to do. If you have a lot of time on your hands, you can go to Bulbapedia or Pokemon DB or whatever to look up that Pokemon's stats and abilities and see if it seems like it would be usable. There's another website called Pikalytics, which might be less helpful in this case, where you can see what Pokemon are used more frequently and what kind of moves and everything are run on them in Pokemon Showdown. I don't believe that Pokemon Showdown has a Pokemon Champions game type set up yet though. So you're gonna see a lot of Pokemon on that list that you won't be able to see in Pokemon Champions. For me, the Mega that I received is Mega Tyranitar. There are also a good handful other on this list that can Mega Evolve, so I didn't necessarily have to go this route. However, if you have played VGC before, you'll probably know that this Tyranitar Excadrill combo has seen a lot of time in the spotlight. If you do find yourself lucky enough to have a Sandstream and Sand Rusher, or a Snow Warning and Slush Rush, or whatever other abilities there are, definitely jump on it. So as I'm seeing this, I know that my game plan is going to try to be to lead with Tyranitar and Excadrill every game. But these two don't do a great job of covering for each other while they're out on the field. If someone has a fighting type Pokemon, or even a fighting type coverage move, many Pokemon learn Brick Break or Close Combat. These Pokemon are severely threatened. So we need to have a couple different ways to ensure that A, if I'm going to be taking this Pokemon into that match, I have ways to make him successful, and B, I have a backup plan if for some reason they're running a lot of fighting type Pokemon. Again, this kind of comes down to the type cores. Since I have this glaring fighting type weakness, I have a couple options. I can run a Ghost type Pokemon, ideally, that I can switch into and will safely eat it because Ghost is immune to fighting. The same can also be true for running a Flying type Pokemon and having a Ground type for a safe switch. Or maybe a Fire type Pokemon and having someone with Storm Drain that you can switch into. For me, my choices were either Golurk or Dragapult. Since I wanted to have a little bit more of a bulky team as they're easier to pilot, I went ahead with Golurk. I threw on the Delphox as yet another way to deal with fighting types. Now you might be looking at my box and thinking that maybe I should have used the Gallade instead. They're both Psychic type, and Gallade is a significantly better Pokemon than Delphox if you're not Mega Evolving. However, another thing that you need to consider when you're building your team is not having all of one type of attacker, either physical or special. So far on my team, I had drafted Tyranitar, Excadrill, and Golurk, which are all physical attackers. If I were to run into, say, an ice team where they had a Alolan Ninetales that used Aurora Veil, and an Avalugg, who is a very beefy physical defender. Even though Excadrill and Tyranitar have stab moves that are super effective against Avalugg, it would take me several turns to kill it because of how beefy it is. For this reason, I would say you should at least try to make sure that you have 2 physical and 2 special attackers on your team. Of the Pokemon that I drafted, this Quaquaval or Quaquaval, however that's said, was really the only carry that I drafted that doesn't need too much assistance from another Pokemon. Though it's nice to come up with some amazing combos of Pokemon switching in and out, using setup moves on each other into some amazing masterpiece, but it takes you several turns to execute. Something like that just does not work very well. Yeah, it can be amazing if you get this amazing combo off, but most likely they're just gonna kill you before it happens. Getting creative with your Pokemon interactions is important, but try to limit how far off the deep end you jump. Lastly, it's really important to have at least a supporting type Pokemon on your team. These come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but the most common that you're going to be seeing is Incineroar and Sinistcha right now. Incineroar, if you've ever been playing competitive, I'm sure you're not surprised to see him here. He's one of the most broken Pokemon of all time, still is, even after they've nerfed him a handful of times through the generations. He has a super overloaded kit with moves like Fake Out, which almost guarantee that one of your opponent Pokemon won't move. He has Intimidate, which is arguably the best competitive ability in the game. And he learns Parting Shot, which not only switches him out of battle later, which most likely made it a safe switch, it reduces some of the opponent's stats and makes it so that he can be switched in again to Intimidate yet again. Yes, he's not doing the most in the damage department. People usually run like Flare Blitz on him or Knockoff, which I think got removed. Now Darkest Lariat is the next best choice. He is not there for that at all. He does weird, gimmicky, switch in, switch out, reduce stats, keep you from doing what you're doing. He's a disruptor. Whimsicott, which is the supporter that I chose to run with out of what I drafted, has a super useful ability called Prankster. This gives priority to status type moves, which can range from anything like Tailwind, which speeds up your Pokemon, or Fake Tears, which sharply reduces your opponent's special defense, meaning that if he's paired with a special attacker, you can get some really sneaky one-shots in. Sinistcha, which is the other most likely that you'll be running into, has a move called Rage Powder. Rage Powder and Follow Me have been critical to the competitive meta for a long time. They redirect attacks into themselves rather than the Pokemon standing next to them. This makes heavy hitting but weak defensively Pokemon much stronger and much safer to have out on the field. The best counter to Intimidate is probably just having special attackers on your team that don't care if they get their stats lowered. And one of the better counters to redirect moves is just having spread moves, such as Heat Wave, Dazzling Gleam, Earthquake, that don't care if they use something like Follow Me. Don't think too hard about drafting your first team, as you have a chance to do it over and over again. Now, mind you, it'll cost you VP every time you want to change something about one of your Pokemon. When it comes to training your Pokemon for competitive play, there's definitely an order of importance to the things that you can do. Probably the most important is getting some strong moves on your Pokemon. Many of these Pokemon have a very wide learn set, but there are a couple things that you want to focus on. First is, what role is that Pokemon playing on your team? Is it a damage carry? Then you want to make sure that it has a lot of damaging moves on it. Is it a supporting Pokemon? Then it should probably have some moves on it that are going to be helping your teammates succeed. Since Tyranitar is one of my carry Pokemon, I want to make sure that he has both of his stab types as moves, and probably at this point, all of your Pokemon should have a stab move for all of their types, unless you have a really good reason not to. I have Dragon Dance on here to help him set up should there ever be an opportunity to use it to help guarantee a win. Thus far, I have not found myself using this, so I might switch it off for a coverage move of some kind, but I'm leaving it for now in case, as the meta evolves, I find that it maybe has some use. Protect is another one of those moves that if you come from singles or the RPG, you've probably never used because there's not really a reason to. In VGC, it can be one of the most powerful moves. Competitive 2v2s probably have an average turn duration of like 10 turns. So if you're able to effectively use Protect and cancel out one of your enemy's turns, you won't necessarily win the game off of a move like that, but you can score a huge advantage. Again, this is one of those moves that unless you have a really good reason why your Pokemon should not have it, it should most likely be running Protect. Changing your Pokemon stats is relatively cheap to the other things that you can do to it, so if you're running low on VP, just ensuring that their stats, again, match the role that they're filling on the team can be a really good way to get the most out of the Pokemon. Since Tyranitar is a physical sweeper for me, I have maxed out his attack and his speed stat, and then you have an extra 2 points that you can throw anywhere. I just threw it in HP, but that kind of stat is not going to make much of a difference in the long run. Choosing their nature can be maybe a little bit more tricky. You can definitely get very specific with changing Pokemon's stats as well as their nature to fine-tune certain circumstances that you'll probably encounter. For example, I know that people are going to try to be using Brick Breaks against my Tyranitar, but I don't know what Pokemon are going to be common enough in the meta to start to plan for encountering that. For example, I've seen a lot of Mega Beedrills so far down in the bottom tiers. I don't know why, but that's just what's happening. Mega Beedrill learns Brick Break. I could calculate on the Pokemon Showdown damage calculator how much defense and HP I would need on my Tyranitar in order to live a Brick Break from Mega Beedrill. Let's say that in order to do that, I need a plus defense nature, and I'm going to choose a minus special attack because I am not special attacking. And then, say it takes 25 points into my defense. So I might take that out of my attack stat if I decide that I need the speed for whatever else I'm encountering in the meta. But being new, you're not going to know that. And at this point, nobody knows that because this game is so new and this rule set is so new that we have no idea what we're going to be seeing out there. Your Pokemon's ability, depending on the Pokemon, might be the difference maker between whether or not it is competitively viable. For Tyranitar, Sandstream is so ridiculously better than Unnerve, I would not even consider using Tyranitar if it did not have Sandstream. Now, when it Mega Evolves, its Mega ability is Sandstream. So if you're on a budget, you might not necessarily need to change your Pokemon's ability if you always plan on Mega Evolving it. When it comes to buying items for your Pokemon, really do not sweat it too hard. If it's a Mega Pokemon, you're putting the Mega Stone on it, hands down. If it's not, you have a couple choices to make. In the shop, there are very few items to choose from. There are basically all of the items that increase a specific type's damage by 20%. You're probably going to want each of these on each of your Pokemon. There are some rare cases that you might want to bury instead. If one of your Pokemon, maybe Snorlax, learns Rest, you might want to put a Chesto Berry on it, which will cure it of that condition. There's also an argument to be made if you're running a Pokemon like Dragonite, who's quad weak to ice, to run one of these berries that reduces the damage done by a super effective move. Right out of the gate, though, they gave you probably some of the best items available to you, such as the Citrus Berry. This item is so good, I think that there are very, very few teams out there that aren't running it. Focus Sash is another one of these items where if you have a squishy Pokemon and you know that it's probably going to die to a single hit of anything super effective, you'll want to give this to that Pokemon. Whimsicott is a really squishy support, and every game, I want it to get off Tailwind, which is mostly going to happen because it has priority because of Prankster. If I can get a second turn with it out there though, its special attacking stat is not too shabby, and if I'm running it next to Delphox, using Fake Tears can be a very lethal combo. Again, try not to overthink this part too much. There's really not a lot wrong that you can do. As you play more competitive, you're going to earn more VP. You'll get more Mons over time that you might decide that you want to switch in. Like, when I built this team, I did not have Incineroar. If Delphox were not needed as a special type attacker on my team, I would almost definitely be trading it out for Incineroar. You'll also probably find, like I did with Tyranitar's Dragon Dance, that there are moves that you aren't using. Or maybe there's Pokemon that you decide that you don't even want to bring at all. If you find that happening, it's easy to change, and after you've had time to play with your team and learn that kind of thing, you'll probably have enough VP to do so. I hope that this quick guide is helpful in your journey into competitive Pokemon. So just get out there, start climbing, and as you get better, you'll have a much better feel for how to do this kind of thing. That's all for now. Take it easy.